The living room glass reflected back to and a version of herself she no longer recognized, fiery red hair under the morning sun, green eyes hiding a beautiful weariness, a restlessness that couldn't be framed. The mansion in Los Angeles seemed suspended in the air, as if breathing luxury in every corner, but no object there carried the weight of an embrace. Her phone blinked on the console with its usual coldness. Extended meeting. I'll call tonight. Robbie. And the echo of the message cut through the hallway like icy wind. And, 25 years old, porcelain skin dotted with discreet freckles, stretched her arms and felt her body asking for something beyond full shelves and an empty schedule. She wasn't lost, she was about to find herself, though she didn't yet know where to reach to turn on the light. The citrus scent of bathroom soap mixed with the aroma of coffee warming in the kitchen, and walked barefoot, feeling the cold marble converse with the soles of her feet. An imaginary camera followed her as she opened the curtains and let the garden invade the room, bougainvilleas bursting with exaggerated color, a clear sky promising a hopeful day. Yet inside, there was a small winter. Not the kind that freezes, but the kind that preserves hidden seeds. She took a slow sip of coffee and set the cup down like someone placing a secret. The silence wasn't empty, it was a stage waiting for the first chord of her life's song. The first chord, however, wouldn't come from Robert, her husband. Married for 2 years, yet largely absent from Anne's life. He, 40 years old, of Japanese descent, elegant in the precision of his words and the punctuality of his flights. He was the kind of man who kept business promises with the discipline of a Swiss watch and loved in a way that believed offering the world was enough to replace his own presence. And didn't judge him. There had been love, there had been tenderness, but there was also a distance that had become an unfinished song. On her canvas, colors were born and died without a final figure. The painting seemed to know what she still hesitated to admit: a hand, a gaze, shared time to hold her up from within was missing. So she decided to start with what she had, her own body. Not as an ornament, but as a home. She scheduled intense workouts, called a sports coaching company, asked for someone who knew how to listen to muscles and silence. When the doorbell rang the next morning, she was ready as if about to meet a new version of herself. She opened the door, and the world stepped inside. Mariah introduced herself with quiet firmness. 27, brunette, long brown hair tied in a practical ponytail, her makeup-free face displaying a beauty that came more from gesture than the mirror. Defined shoulders, impeccable posture, a deep voice that seemed to have learned how to use space. "Good morning, Anne. Can I leave my bag here?" Her perfume was woody with a note of freshness after rain, and the room, for a moment, breathed differently. And felt her own body straighten as if wanting to be seen by someone who looked beyond the surface. "I like the light in this house," Mariah said, walking to the glass wall and measuring the distance from the rug to the window, like someone setting a stage. "And I like your decision. People who choose to start with their bodies are usually preparing for something bigger." The phrase hung in the air like golden dust. And smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture she made when needing to hide a blush. "Then let's begin," she replied, and her own voice sounded firmer than in recent weeks. The first warm-up sequence brought back the texture of simple things, the slightly rough rug against her toes, the sound of the resistance band stretching, her breath finding rhythm. Mariah explained with short, precise phrases, demonstrated movements with ease, touched the dumbbell bar and left the map of the next gesture there. And followed, attentive to what moved inside her. The trainer stayed close, not by accident but by method, and yet there was something in her care that wasn't just method. It was presence. "Adjust your left foot," Mariah instructed, stepping closer to align Anne's hips. The touch came clean, technical, but skin recognizes notes the mind takes longer to name. And held her breath for a second and released it slowly, like someone learning to trust water before diving. "Better," the trainer said, and the praise settled on the back of Anne's neck with unexpected warmth. The workout continued between instructions and small silences that didn't apologize for existing. Outside, Birds cut through the garden like white arrows. Inside, a new rhythm emerged. And notice the precision with which Mariah inhabited her own body, the firm delicacy of her hands, the eyes that, when resting on her, didn't pierce, they landed. There was no invasion, there was care. And in that care, a promise that something inside her could finally be heard. As they switched exercises, a conversation dismantled the formal distance. "And the paintings?" Mariah asked, nodding toward the canvas leaning against the wall. "They look like horizons searching for a figure. They're landscapes waiting for someone to pass through," and replied without much thought, surprising herself with her own honesty. "Or maybe waiting for me to reach them." "Let's work so you can reach them," Mariah said simply, like someone turning on a kitchen light at dawn and finding the way without noise. Anne's sweat began to taste like victory, not exhaustion. Her body remembered itself with gratitude. When Mariah corrected her posture, the touch was precise, and the retreat, respectful, but between touch and retreat, there was a moment longer than the others, a space where an entire comet could fit. It wasn't indiscreet provocation, it was the exact pause of someone who knows the value of one extra second. "Posture," Mariah murmured, almost in Anne's ear, while holding her abdomen to activate her core. The word vibrated like a bass in Anne's ribcage. Her skin prickled in places she didn't remember. The body doesn't lie when it recognizes someone who sees it wholly. There was a biography in and that few people knew. In school, an experience or two with girls had lit discreet fires, which she kept hidden for fear of seeming unruly. She grew up, chose an elegant path, and the path chose her back. It wasn't about labels, it was about honesty. There, facing Mariah, that honesty didn't fight with respect or time. It just asked for passage. "Water?" the trainer asked, extending a bottle. Their fingers touched for a clear instant, transparent like washed glass. Mariah smiled with her eyes, a brief smile that said, "I'm here," and responded with one of her own, shy but whole. It wasn't a game, it was recognition. The entire house seemed to relax its shoulders. Even the closed piano shone differently. The AC whispered, and the scent of waxed wood carried the memory of autumn afternoons and had spent with a book in her lap, waiting for the sound of Robert's key in the door. The sound never came. Today, there was another sound, the careful cadence of someone who, upon entering, doesn't erase what exists, they add to it. "You have good body awareness," Mariah observed while adjusting an elastic band. "When we align attention, the rest follows." "I thought I'd forgotten how to listen to my body," Anne said, realizing she wasn't just talking about muscles. "The body whispers before it screams," Mariah replied, without drama, like someone trusting the obvious. "Today, it's calling your name." There was a beautiful silence after that. Not the kind that pushes you toward an abyss, but the kind that holds you at the edge of a lake. In the final sequence, Anne felt her own strength like someone discovering a secret compartment. It was hers, it always had been, she just needed an open window and a steady voice outside saying, "You can." When the workout ended, a light breeze crossed the room and made the curtains breathe. Mariah packed the equipment with the same precision she'd moved through each set, unhurried, without performing grand goodbyes. And closed her eyes for a second and, upon opening them, met Mariah's gaze. It didn't last long. It lasted enough. There was a path there that neither of them named, and it was better that way. "Same time tomorrow?" Mariah asked, checking her phone. "Morning," Anne replied, and her own voice had a new breadth, as if someone had opened a room she didn't know existed. "The sunlight is prettier then." "It is," Mariah said, putting her phone away. "And you work better with direct light." The phrase landed on and with a grave sweetness. Direct light. Yes, she wanted direct light. She walked Mariah to the door. When the trainer turned to say goodbye, her ponytail drew an arc in the air, and her perfume lingered a few seconds longer, not by accident, but because certain scents are also memory. See you tomorrow, Anne. See you tomorrow. The door closed with a soft click, leaving in the air a vibration that wasn't longing or anxiety, it was promise. Anne pressed her forehead against the wood for a moment and laughed to herself, a small laugh, the kind that escapes when something aligns inside. She walked to the leaning canvas and, without much thought, drew a sure stroke, opening a passage in the horizon of the painting. There, where before there was only color searching for a figure, a road appeared. She didn't know where it led. Maybe to the garden. Maybe to an airport. Maybe to a body. It was too early to guess. It was early, but it wasn't too early anymore. Her phone buzzed again on the console. Might be delayed another week. Closing a big deal. Proud of you. R. And read it, breathed, and set the phone down carefully, like returning a piece to its exact spot on the shelf. There was no anger in the gesture. There was acknowledgement. The road she'd just drawn on the canvas was hers. The rest of the world could follow, or not. She returned to the living room, picked up the resistance band left on the floor, felt in her hands the recent memory of Mariah's touch, firm and gentle. The afternoon melted into gold that tinted the corners with honey. And opened the window, the wind entered and tousled her red hair with the intimacy of an old friend. The house, which had so often felt like an aquarium to her, now had windows. The day's final scene stayed in her eyes, the faint mark of fingers still on her abdomen, the memory of the deep voice saying, "The body whispers before it screams," and that parting look that promised what only time had the right to fulfill. In the hallway, before going upstairs, she cast one last glance at the door. No one was there. Still, and stopped, breathed, and let slip, almost in a whisper, like someone writing the first line of a verse unsure of the rhyme, tomorrow. The morning dawned wide, cloudless, and the light invaded the house as if invited. And woke before the alarm, her skin still remembering the firmness of Mariah's hands the day before. She showered slowly, chose graphite leggings and a white tank top, tied her red hair in a careless bun. In the mirror was an expression she hadn't seen in a long time, not euphoria, not anxiety, readiness. She descended the stairs with steps that didn't scratch the silence, and the house seemed to recognize a new energy in her. The coffee stayed in the cup longer than usual because her heart was already awake without espresso's help. When the doorbell rang, her stomach vibrated like a tuned string. Mariah entered with the morning on her shoulders. She carried a light backpack, a rolled-up mat, her brown hair tied with a black band that let her whole face show. Her smile wasn't big, but it was firm, the kind that steadies the ground. "Good morning, Anne." "Ready?" she asked, her deep voice split between question and certainty. "Ready," Anne replied, and the R in the word almost purred. She gestured to the already prepared room, open curtains, clean space, the closed piano serving as a shelf for a water bottle and a towel. Mariah placed the mat in the center and looked around, measuring distances like someone reading sheet music with their eyes. The warm-up began with mobility movements. Slow shoulder circles, stretches that drew the body's perimeter in the air. Mariah demonstrated, and then repeated with an attention that wasn't just technical, there was a new care for her own breath, as if breathing fully for the first time in months. "Notice your ribcage," Mariah said, placing her hands on her own ribs before lightly touching Anne's. "Feel the sides, not just the front. There. Feel it?" Anne nodded, eyes closed for a second, feeling the firm hand guide her inhalation. When she opened her eyes, Mariah's face was inches away, dark lashes framing the light. A microshock ran through her skin. Mariah retreated millimeters, just enough to restore professional distance, but left the presence, which was what mattered. Strength sets with light dumbbells followed, and Anne's mouth went dry not from exhaustion but from the near-absolute focus proximity demanded. With each rep, Mariah traced the line of her shoulders with her eyes, corrected her wrist angle with a brief touch, encouraged without empty praise. "Good. 2 more. The word, good, landed on and as if arriving at her back from within, holding up the rep that seemed impossible. Soft instrumental music played from a playlist, a piano breathed notes that rose discreetly and fell without fanfare. The rhythm of sound and bodies had found a beat. "I need to show you something," Anne said between sets, nodding toward the leaning canvas. Mariah approached, her sneakers making a soft sound on the mat. The painting now showed a road emerging from the horizon and coming toward the viewer, cutting through a field dissolved in blues and greens. "This appeared last night," Anne explained. "I don't know where it goes." "Roads rarely do," Mariah replied without poetic pretense. "But you feel when they've been opened in the right place." She tilted her head, studying the canvas, then turned to Anne. "That stroke is your rhythm. Bring it into the workout." They returned to the body. Squats with bands, lunges, planks. During the plank, Mariah knelt beside Anne and placed 2 fingers on her lower abdomen. "Engage the transverse. Imagine a zipper rising from your pelvis to your navel." The metaphor found its place, and Anne felt her muscles wake as if someone had turned on an entire stage's lights. "There. Hold. 5, 4, 3, perfect." The "perfect" came like a sip of water. And collapsed onto the mat laughing silently, catching her breath, and Mariah laughed too, a low, seashell laugh. The phone buzzed on the console, and ignored it. The second buzz came with the insistence of an old life. She took a deep breath, walked to the phone, and read, "Estimate is 5 more days. Proud of your focus. R." Robert's pride was like an overwrapped gift, hard to open and forcing feigned gratitude. And turned the phone face down, returned to the mat, and Mariah read in her eyes what the message didn't say. She didn't ask. Instead, she suggested, "Let's do active stretching in the garden. The light outside seems to ask for movement." They went. The lawn was indecently green. The scent of bougainvilleas mixed with morning-watered earth. The sky, unhurried, took up space above them. Mariah positioned and facing the brightness and guided her through a sequence of posterior chain stretches, breath, and presence. "Look at the horizon between 2 points," she said, and then chose a patch of sky between leaves. Her body relaxed into the smallness, and there, a peak of tension formed not in muscle but awareness. Mariah, behind her, holding her elbows to adjust her chest's openness, the weight of her hands landing with the precision of someone who knows the delicacy of structures. And held her breath a moment, then released it slowly, feeling warmth seek her skin. "You're more connected today," Mariah noted. "Your body trusted." "I think I trusted before it did," and said, unplanned honesty leaving her lips, and watched the phrase hover like a bird deciding to stay. There was coffee afterward, without ceremony. 2 cups on the kitchen counter, the machine whispering steam, the light biting slowly at porcelain edges. Mariah rested her forearms on the stone, and then noticed a thin vertical scar on her wrist, an athlete's mark. "How was it?" the trainer asked, referring to the workout, but also the after, or the before, or the nameless. And stared at her cup, then lifted her gaze, like tuning an instrument I thought was broken. Mariah nodded seriously, like someone respecting the sacred in another's words. "The body likes those who listen," she said. "And you have a good ear." The compliment carried no easy seduction, it came in the right tone. And yet, it lit something in Anne, something between pride and desire, between the child hitting the first piano note and the woman realizing she's seen beyond the frame. They returned to the living room for the final part, myofascial release, deep breathing, a short guided relaxation. And lay on the mat, eyes closed. Mariah, seated beside her, asked her to notice the contact of her neck with the floor, the weight of her heels, her tongue resting on her palate. The deep voice guided each step like someone opening doors. "Notice the space behind your heart," she said, and the phrase entered and like a key finding the right tooth. The redhead let her shoulders yield a millimeter. In that millimeter was an entire life. When Anne opened her eyes, Mariah was still there, close enough for their scents to meet: coffee, clean skin, wood. The gaze that followed lasted only as long as allowed, then retreated, like someone respecting a lake's edge. "Done," Mariah whispered. "Tomorrow we can try a progression. Only if it makes sense for you." "It does," Anne replied faster than intended. "It really does." And the "really" carried a second meaning that didn't apologize for existing. The phone buzzed again, and didn't go to it. Instead, she crossed the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took 2 small water bottles. She handed one to Mariah, fingers purposefully brushing hers. It was a brief touch, a small, precise voltage, the kind that turns on a bedside lamp in a dark room. Mariah held her gaze for a thread of time. It wasn't blind reciprocation, it was reading. Their hands parted, and the air between them grew denser. "Will you paint today?" Mariah asked, breaking the intensity with a half-step back. Professionalism with well-adjusted breaks. "I think so." And glanced at the leaning canvas and felt the urge to widen the road. "Maybe put someone walking." "Put them," Mariah said, packing the mat. "But only if they can choose to stop and look around. Walking just to walk is surrender dressed as movement." The phrase made Anne smile sideways. The woman had an economy of words that left thoughts lingering. She walked Mariah to the door. The garden filtered distant car sounds. A plane streaked the afternoon with a dissolving white line. "Same time tomorrow?" Mariah asked. "Same time," Anne replied. There was a second of silence that seemed to want to grow, like foam. Mariah opened her mouth, closed it, then adjusted her backpack strap. "Anne." She began, then stopped, her gaze traveling from Anne's eyes to her lips and back, a circuit that sent electricity down her neck. "You're doing well. With you, it's easier," Anne returned, and the phrase hung between them with a rim of light. Mariah smiled faintly, like someone holding something in their palm they don't want to spill. "See you tomorrow." The door closed, and the echo was softer than yesterday's. Anne stood still a moment, the cold water in her hand reminding her that her body had a place in the world. She walked to the canvas, uncapped the white tube, and traced, over the road, the silhouette of someone. She didn't decide if it was her. She didn't decide if it was Mariah. The brush hovered a long second, a second that didn't end. Curtains fluttered in an unhurried breeze. The phone began ringing again in the next room. Anne breathed and, before answering, said to what wasn't yet heard, "I." The third meeting happened as if time had chosen to slow for them. The California sky dawned impeccable blue, and Anne's house seemed suspended in that same shade of clarity. She woke with the strange anxiety of someone waiting for something they can't yet name and lingered longer than usual before the closet. Her fingers traced dresses, blouses, silk fabrics Robert always said matched her fair skin. But that morning, she chose a black tank top with a subtle neckline, leaving her shoulders bare and her red hair loose like flame on porcelain. In the mirror, she saw she'd dressed not for herself, not for her distant husband, but for someone who'd be there in minutes. The doorbell rang, and Anne's heart beat like a piano's low note. Mariah entered carrying the scent of freshly watered streets and her own skin, warm and clean. She wore fitted workout pants and a simple gray cotton top, too plain for the strength she exuded. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, but her gaze seemed to carry something more. "Good morning," she said, her deep voice smooth in the space. And replied softly, her throat drier than coffee could fix. The workout began in the living room but soon became more than exercises. Mariah demonstrated flexibility moves, and Anne followed, but each gesture felt like choreography from an intimate theater. At one point, Mariah had her lie on the mat to stretch her hips. Kneeling beside her, one hand firm on Anne's thigh, the other guiding her knee, the touch was precise, professional, but the heat left behind made Anne hold her breath. She closed her eyes a moment, and when she opened them, Mariah was watching her silently, as if reading something written on her skin. No words, just a suspended second where her whole body asked not to move. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, a reminder of the real world, of Robert's absent voice that could intrude any moment. And ignored it. "Keep going," she said, more to herself than Mariah, and the trainer nodded, gripping her knee more firmly. "Relax your breath." The command echoed like confession. And exhaled slowly, and with it, let slip a soft murmur she couldn't contain. Mariah's face tilted slightly, not to get too close, but enough for tension to materialize in the space between them. The workout continued between lingering looks and silences that spoke louder than instructions. During resistance band exercises, Mariah stood behind and to correct her arm pull. Her body almost grazed Anne's back, and the scent of wood and clean sweat filled the air. "Hold steady," she whispered, and the word "steady" sounded like a request beyond posture. And tried to focus, but her heart pounded loud enough to mark the exercise's rhythm. When their eyes met in the window's reflection, neither looked away. It was the longest gaze yet, one that said, "We know." A break was called, but the break became another provocation. Mariah removed her gray top, revealing a dark sports bra that outlined her silhouette with clarity. The motion was natural, but Anne noticed every detail as if the world had slowed just for her to see. Her breath caught, and her eyes betrayed her attempt to disguise, tracing the contour of Mariah's shoulders to her abdomen. Mariah didn't pretend not to notice. A half-smile flickered on her lips, too fast to catch, too slow not to ignite. The workout ended with garden stretches under bougainvillea shade. Anne lay on her back, and Mariah knelt close to align her arms. Her fingers touched Anne's inner elbow, sliding to her wrist with calculated softness. "Release more," she guided, her voice too low to be just technical. And obeyed, eyes half closed, her body surrendered to warmth not from the sun. Wind played with her red hair, and for a second, she was certain the outside world had vanished. When they finished, they faced each other, still breathless, as if they'd run miles without moving. "You've progressed fast," Mariah said, packing equipment. "Maybe faster than you realize." And smiled faintly, but her eyes spoke another language, one needing no grammar. The goodbye at the door was longer, the "see you tomorrow" held by an invisible thread pulling each syllable. And when the door closed, Anne leaned against it, laughing alone, not from joy, but from a desire she could no longer deny. The afternoon arrived with a different clarity, the kind that makes skin crave streets and thoughts crave risk. And spent longer than usual before the dresser, as if translating a new language with just her fingers. She chose soft shorts outlining her legs with confessed lightness and a cotton tank top letting her collarbones breathe. Her red hair fell loose, but she tucked 2 strands back, revealing her neck like signing her name in air. She sought no disguises, in her was the quiet courage of someone choosing to enter their own body through the front door. Outside, bougainvilleas burst with color, inside, her heart beat to a song without lyrics. The doorbell rang, and for a moment, the house seemed to listen too. Mariah entered with an evening breeze, her ponytail high, her face alight. She wore a dark top with straps carving her shoulders and biker shorts molding her silhouette with objectivity. Their first glance didn't ask permission, it traveled, recognized, paused where needed, and smiled where possible. "Good light today," Mariah said, setting her bag on a chair. "And good choice." The comment landed between them naturally, unhighlighted, yet lit a territory of skin. And gestured to the living room, already with the mat unrolled, curtains open to the edge. They began with warm-up, but their bodies knew there was more here than stretching and turning. Mariah guided scapula alignment, approached and from behind, and with 2 fingers, suggested an invisible adjustment. The touch lingered a second longer, not enough for disrespect, exact for language. "Breathe around your chest, not against it," she said, and the phrase found home. and filled the space behind her collarbones with air and, for a moment, felt her inner landscape gaining windows. The living room mirror reflected two outlines not competing but conversing. Strength sets came, and Mariah proposed progression. Today we experiment with range. Lightweight, more space. There was a manifesto in this, occupying what's yours unapologetically. And leaned forward, her shorts riding up a centimeter on her thigh, and the air changed density. Mariah counted softly, 3, 2, 1 more, good. On, good, her hand rested on Anne's side to remind her center. Anne's skin burned, not from blush, from presence. At break, water. Both in the kitchen, leaning on the island, bottle metal condensing cold on fingers. What's that perfume? And asked, unplanned, like discovering a plant and wanting its name. Cedar and something green, Mariah replied, laughing at her own terms. I don't memorize labels. And leaned a millimeter closer to her shoulder, didn't touch, just breathed. It works, she said, and the verb stayed with them, working in different ways. Back in the living room, a band sequence bound Anne's wrists to an axis demanding control. Mariah, ahead, held the other end, regulating tension with her hands, torso slightly inclined, abdominal muscles casting shadows under her top. Come with me, she asked, and, with me, was direction more than invitation. Their eyes met in the window's reflection, neither looked away. The band stretched, and an invisible thread stretched with it, crossing the room end to end, holding gestures, releasing secrets. In the garden, light dimmed half a shade, and leaf shadows dappled the floor. The hip mobility sequence demanded closeness. Mariah knelt beside and to adjust femur rotation, her fingers glided over skin with precision near music. Release your groin, let the weight fall forward, she instructed, and obeyed, hands on the ground, hair spilling in vivid red. Her top gaped slightly when she inhaled deeper, and Mariah averted her gaze a half-second, like respecting an altar. But she returned, because here the sacred was also work, her hand on Anne's sacrum, offering a millimeter push. There. The word came low, and bit her lower lip without pain, just to wake a limit. The phone buzzed on the console, insistent, as if reality demanded presence. And didn't move. The buzzing stopped, opening a silence highlighting the rest. Mariah called a new set, now focusing on stability. Trust your ankle, she said, and the phrase crossed meanings. And balanced on one foot, and Mariah neared her palm, not touching but offering a field. If you need, I'm here. The promise had no varnish, so it weighed more. And breathed, found her axis, held. Her whole body learned a new phrase. You're different today, Mariah ventured while adjusting a strap, eyes flicking to Anne's and back to the knot. More, decided. The word found her neckline and climbed to her eyes. And you? And returned, seeking humor to tame the fire. More, incisive. Mariah smirked. Must be the light. It wasn't the light. A breeze entered the window and teased the hem of Anne's shorts. During pectoral stretches, they faced each other, an arm's length apart. Mariah held Anne's wrists and opened her arms like prying an old, stuck window. The motion exposed Anne's collarbones in a calm curve, and her skin answered with small electric current. Feel the space? Mariah asked, not stepping closer but not retreating. I do, Anne said, and the word left her like touching a glass to make it hum. They moved to side planks. The floor returned cold to Anne's forearm, her body drawing a definitive diagonal. Mariah knelt, brought her face close to check shoulder alignment, and spoke almost in her ear, keep your neck long. The deep voice tracing her skin was a whole map. And held the effort and, yielding, collapsed with a short laugh, the kind that cleans. Mariah laughed too, and for a second they seemed like teens discovering a new mischief, no guilt, all the care in the world. At rest, Mariah took a scarf from her bag and tightened her ponytail. The motion lifted her top a centimeter, betraying a shadow of abdomen. Anne's gaze went and returned, honest and quick. Mariah noticed, and the orbit of a smile nearly closed. "Water?" she offered. "I want," Anne replied, but the thirst wasn't in her throat. The last part brought an exercise with a band anchored to the piano, the symbol of silent music supporting another harmony. Anne positioned herself, feet firm, and Mariah came behind to adjust her elbow angle. Their bodies didn't touch at first they measured. Then they brushed. A small, pointed, conscious contact. Anne's breath changed rhythm. "Keep going," Mariah said, and "keep going" had more layers than the movement asked. The sequence ended, but the contact left a trail, like a finger passed over dusted light. They went to the garden to finish with hamstring stretches. Anne sat, legs extended, and Mariah sat behind her, knees apart, offering her thighs as back support. "Tell me if it's too much," she warned, and her hands came to Anne's abdomen, guiding a gentle forward bend. Anne's red head rested a moment on Mariah's shoulder. "Just wait, no promise." Still, the whole afternoon seemed to tilt. "You okay?" Mariah asked, her mouth close to Anne's hair. "I am," Anne said, and didn't lie. They stayed like that for seconds, countable and uncountable, breathing together, the world reduced to a rectangle of shade on grass. When they rose, their skin held the clean gleam of work and the air vibrated with something choosing not to rush. Mariah rolled the mat but not the closeness. And touched her own neck, distracted, leaving a trail of chills reaching Mariah's eyes. "Tomorrow I'll bring a different plan," Mariah said at the door. "More dynamic." The dynamic held secrets. And nodded. "Bring it." Then, after a second, added, "I like when you decide." Mariah paused, back to the door, as if choosing the right word to unbalance nothing. She turned, leaned a shoulder on the frame, held Anne's gaze calmly. "I like it too," she said, "no more." The silence after wasn't discomfort, it was the exact interval before the note resolving the melody. She made to leave but took half a step back, a short gesture opening all possibilities and withdrawing them in the same motion. Mariah's face stayed 20 centimeters from Anne's. Cedar perfume met soap and skin scent. Time slowed, the house breathed, the garden stilled. "Anne." She began, and the name said that way was almost a hand. Their pupils dilated enough for no doubt. Then someone clanged the front gate, a metallic snap returning the world. Their gaze wavered, and the suspended nearness didn't break, it stored itself. "See you tomorrow," Mariah said, with a smile that didn't promise, only acknowledged. "See you tomorrow," Anne replied, her voice lower than her heart. The door closed slowly. Anne stood motionless for 1, 2, 3 seconds that could be chapters. She walked to the leaning canvas and, with a quick stroke, drew 2 silhouettes close on the road, almost touching. The light receded in the room, leaving edges amber. The phone buzzed again on the console and died. And neared her fingers to the painting like measuring a distance. Stopped a millimeter short, exactly where skin doesn't touch but already feels. And in that space, the story leaned toward what would come, like a body preparing for the next step. The afternoon had begun with a simple but promise-laden message, "Anne, I can't make it tomorrow. Something came up. But I thought, maybe I could come tonight, before dinner, to stretch and give you the workout plan. Would that work?" And smiled at the canvas, her heart racing. Robert was away, the staff gone. The entire house, silent, was now the perfect stage for a meeting, no longer hiding behind excuses. She dressed with calculated haste, knowing exactly the effect she wanted. A floral dress, short and light, moving with each step to reveal more than it should, her legs exposed to the house's play of light. Her red hair loose, lips tinted discreet but provocative red. This was a different Anne, willing, surrendered to what would come. When the doorbell rang, She opened it to find Mariah in another version of herself, a black dress clinging to her body, molding every line as if drawn for her muscles and curves. Her brown gaze rested on and like a caress before any touch. There were no more barriers. No more pretexts. "Hi," Mariah said, her voice low, laden with intent. "Hi." And replied, the floral dress swaying as she stepped back to let her in. In the living room, the two dresses were almost characters, Anne's light fabric brightening the space, Mariah's black adding density. They approached without rush but without pause. The first touch was simple, a hand over another, fingers fitting naturally. Then came the kiss. Slow at first, exploratory, but full of contained hunger. Their lips met as if recognizing a familiar place and, in seconds, softness became urgency. Anne pulled Mariah by the nape, feeling her body's heat through the dress. Mariah responded with hands sliding down Anne's narrow waist, tracing curves to find the dress's light hem. The floral fabric rode up centimeters, revealing skin, and sighed softly against her lips. The kiss deepened, wet, loaded with all they'd avoided until now. Their breaths grew uneven, the room filling with their sounds mixed with curtains rustling in night wind. Anne let herself be guided to the couch, lying back slowly as Mariah covered her body with her own. Hands explored, discovered, gripped. Every curve was mapped with voracious tenderness, every sigh turned to music. "I've waited so long for this." Anne murmured, eyes half-lidded. "Me too." Mariah replied, her deep voice a promise. Clothes became too small an obstacle. Fabric slid to the floor, and skin finally met without barriers. Anne's body arched under the trainer's touch, a note of pleasure escaping her lips. Mariah kissed each line of her collarbone, descending with lips and tongue, while her hands explored with skill and desire. Anne held her hair, pulling lightly, there was no resistance left between them. Hours lost themselves in surrender. Pleasure came in long, successive waves, each more intense than the last. And discovered dormant territories in her body, awakened by Mariah's patience and hunger. The garden outside seemed to breathe with them, complicit, as night deepened. And when exhausted bodies met, entwined, there was no guilt left, only certainty they'd crossed into another world. Robert returned only a week later. And in that week, Anne and Mariah lived an explosion of life. They didn't limit themselves to that first night. They reunited the next morning, still in bed, laughing and kissing like teens but loving like women. Workouts became excuses for bolder touches, stretches ended in lingering kisses, and each night was a new discovery. Anne's body became territory explored with devotion, Mariah's a map of pleasure where every curve hid a secret. Days filled with complicity and lust. Breakfast kisses stolen between coffee sips. Lunches interrupted by caresses not waiting for food to cool. Long showers, laughter, moans echoing off marble. Time seemed suspended, each moment inviting the next. Only weeks later, when hiding was impossible, Anne sat with Robert for the inevitable talk. They were in the home office, he just back from a trip, exhausted but lucid. And told him everything with honesty, the emptiness, the absence, meeting Mariah, desire turned to love. Robert listened silently, eyes fixed on the carpet. Finally, he sighed. "I lost you long before her. I won't ask you to stay." There was no fight. There was acceptance, and a mature goodbye. With no barriers left, Anne and Mariah embraced the life awaiting them. Mariah received an offer to train athletes in Europe, and Anne chose to follow. In Lisbon, they found a home. Mariah immersed herself in work, and set up a riverside studio painting canvases full of color and intensity. They adopted a dog, symbol of their new family, and shared workdays, passionate nights, and mornings waking entwined, laughing at their own memories. Anne was no longer an empty woman in a glass mansion. She was an artist, lover, and companion, living fully a passion born from the improbable and flourishing beyond borders. With Mariah, she learned true luxury was never in big houses or expensive trips, but in the touch that awakens, the gaze that holds, the freedom to be who you are. And you? Do you believe love can cross barriers, borders, and expectations? Subscribe now, leave a comment sharing what this story stirred in you, and share it with those who need to feel love always finds a way.